At my son's grand opening, he leaned close and said through his teeth, "Take that ring off before you embarrass me in front of my investors." When I refused, he had security move me toward the door at his own event. That's when a United States senator stepped forward, put himself between me and those guards, and said 8 words that made 200 people go completely still. "I'm glad you found this. Stay with me until the end and drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this reaches." I never imagined I'd be standing in a marble lobby, being told I didn't belong there by the same person I used to carry on my shoulders at Little League games. I'm 62 years old, retired battalion chief, Galveston Fire Department, 28 years on the job. I spent those years breathing smoke so other people could breathe clean air. I pulled a pregnant woman from a second-floor window on a January morning cold enough to freeze the hose lines. I worked a 6-alarm warehouse fire for 14 straight hours, with a cracked rib I didn't know about until I went to the emergency room the following week. When I retired, my crew threw me a going-away dinner at a barbecue place on Seawall Boulevard. My daughter-in-law organized it. My son was in New York for a conference and sent a bottle of scotch, with a card that said he was proud of me. I kept that card on my refrigerator for 8 months. The night of the grand opening, I wore my gray dress slacks, a white button-down, and a sport coat I'd had dry cleaned for the occasion. On my right hand, I wore the battalion chief's ring the department gave me at retirement, a heavy silver piece with the department seal pressed into the face. On my lapel, I'd pinned a small commemorative medallion from the department's centennial celebration. Nothing outrageous. I looked like a 62-year-old man going to his son's important event, because that's exactly what I was. The Hargrove Group's new waterfront hotel, the Meridian, had taken 4 years to build, 14 stories of glass and steel right on the seawall. My son had a gift for making things look inevitable, the kind of developer who could stand in front of an empty lot and make you see the building that was going to be there. I won't pretend I wasn't proud of him. I was deeply, genuinely proud of him. The way you're proud of something you had a small hand in making, but mostly just had the privilege of watching grow. Walking into that lobby that night, though, I knew something was off before a single word was said. My son spotted me from across the room and the smile left his face. Not gradually, just gone. He excused himself from the cluster of suits he'd been standing with and crossed the lobby with the particular energy of a man who'd already decided something. "Dad," he kept his voice low, but the edge in it carried. "What is that on your lapel?" I looked down. My centennial pin. The department gave them out when. "I know what it is." He glanced back toward the group he'd left. "This is a black tie adjacent event. I have investment partners here, city council members, media from 3 outlets. He paused. "Take the pin off and the ring." I was quiet for a moment. "I'm not taking off my ring, son." "It's a fire department ring, Dad. This is a hotel opening." "It's my ring." His jaw tightened. "You know what people see when they look at you? They see my background. They see where I came from." That one landed differently than he intended it to. I let the silence stretch. "I'll pretend I didn't hear that," I said, and I turned to walk toward the bar. I should have seen what came next. I know that now. I stood near the back of the lobby holding a club soda I wasn't drinking, watching my son work the room. He was good at it, I'll say that plainly. He moved from group to group with the ease of someone who'd grown up doing this, which he hadn't. He grew up in a 3-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood in Galveston. He learned to shake hands at a firehouse Christmas party when he was 9 years old. Everything he knew about making a room feel like an opportunity, he'd either taught himself or borrowed from someone else. I wondered sometimes if he ever thought about that. My daughter-in-law found me around 7 o'clock. She was elegant in a black dress, her hair up, and she had the look of someone managing 12 things at once. "He's nervous," she said, as if that explained everything. "He's always been nervous before something big," I said, "but it never made him cruel before." She looked at the floor for a moment, then she squeezed my arm and moved on. The speeches started at 7:30. My son stood at a podium in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Gulf, and he spoke about vision and persistence and building something that would outlast all of us. The crowd listened. They applauded in the right places. I clapped with them and meant it. Then Senator Emmett Dawson walked in. I recognized him the way you recognize politicians who've been in office long enough, from billboards and local news segments, and the way a room quietly reorganizes itself when someone important enters. He was maybe 50, silver at the temples, the kind of face that photographs well in a way that seems almost unfair. He represented our district in Austin, and had been making noise for 2 years about a federal run. His arrival with truestory set off a quiet ripple through the crowd. My son noticed immediately and his face brightened. He stepped down from the platform to greet him personally. I watched from the back of the room and thought nothing of it. 20 minutes later, everything fell apart. I was talking with a woman from the fire marshal's office I'd known for 15 years when I felt a hand on my elbow. One of the venue's security staff, a large man in a dark jacket, steered me firmly away from the conversation. "Sir, I've been asked to show you to the exit." I stopped walking. "Excuse me?" "The host has requested." "The host is my son," I said it plainly without raising my voice. "Yes, sir." He asked that I let go of my arm. He released my elbow immediately, and then my son was there, appearing from nowhere the way he always had when a situation needed managing. "Dad." His voice had changed. Something had crossed over in him between our first conversation and this one. "You've been drawing attention all evening. The pin, the ring, stopping people to tell department stories. I had an investor ask me if my father was interviewing for the security team." I felt heat move through my chest. "Someone said that to you?" "It doesn't matter who said it. What matters is that you are making me look like I don't belong in my own room, like I'm some kid who stumbled into money instead of a man who built something from nothing." His voice dropped, but the words got harder. "You embarrass me standing there with your fireman's ring and your little pin. That's the truth. You embarrass me at my own event." The lobby had gone quiet around us. People had noticed that particular social alertness, the way a crowd senses when something is about to become a scene. It was happening. I looked at my son and thought about the 14 hours I'd spent in burning buildings so I could come home and be his father. I thought about the overtime shifts I'd worked to pay for his business school applications, the fees for the programs, the flight to his MBA interview at Tulane, that I'd bought him and never brought up again. I thought about the last 2 years before I retired, when I'd turned down a desk promotion specifically to stay on active shifts and keep my overtime eligibility, because he needed money and I needed to provide it, and there was nothing more complicated than that. Then I thought about the fact that he was standing in front of 200 people telling me. I embarrassed him. "I have never once," I said slowly, "been ashamed of who I am, and I did not raise you to be ashamed of me." "You didn't raise me to be anything in particular," he said. "You raised me to be a firefighter's kid, which meant watching you leave for shifts and come home smelling like smoke. I raised myself to become something different. I did that. Me." He said it with a certainty that was almost clean, like he'd rehearsed it somewhere private and finally found the right audience. "This building has nothing to do with you." He nodded toward security. "Please show him out." I walked on my own. I didn't need to be escorted. The lobby seemed very large and very still, and my ears were ringing the way they do when something strikes you that you haven't finished understanding yet. I was 6 steps from the door. "Stop." The word came from behind me. One word, from a voice with the particular quality of someone who'd spent decades in rooms full of people who needed to be heard. I stopped not because I was told to, but because something in that voice made stopping feel like the right thing to do. I turned around. Senator Emmett Dawson was standing between me and my son. He was not looking at me. He was looking at my son with an expression I can only describe as the way a man looks when he has decided to be both angry and disappointed at the same time. "I know who that man is," the senator said. His voice was quiet, but in that silence it went everywhere. "And I think it's time everyone here did too." I don't know why I didn't recognize him. 22 years is a long time. He'd been 27 when I pulled him out of a house fire on Avenue L, a Wednesday night in February, and I remember it was cold because the water from the hoses had frozen on the street by the time we were done. He'd been renting a room from an elderly widow while he studied for the bar exam. The fire started in the kitchen. The woman got out. He didn't. I'd gone through a window on the 2nd floor. Visibility was nothing. I found him by sound. He was still conscious enough to be coughing, which was the only thing that saved him. I carried him down a staircase that gave way on the 3rd step. We both went through. I came out of it with a broken wrist and 3 cracked ribs. He came out with smoke inhalation and 2nd-degree burns on his forearm where he'd tried to shield his face with his sleeve. He'd sent a handwritten card to the station afterward. I remember it because my crew teased me about the embossed stationery for a month. The card said, "I owe you everything I have left to do. I will not waste it." I had not seen him since. He had clearly not forgotten me. My name is Emmett Dawson, he said, still facing my son. Most of you know my work in the state legislature. What most of you don't know is that 22 years ago I was trapped in a house fire on this island. I was 27 years old. I was going to die in that building. He paused, and when he continued his voice had a different quality, something stripped back, the way voices get when people speak about things they've carried a long time. This man came through a window on the second floor and carried me out. He took a fall through a staircase on the way down and didn't stop moving. The lobby was so quiet I could hear the gulf through the glass. Lou Hargrove, the senator said, turning to look at me directly, and hearing my name in that voice in that room was one of the stranger experiences of my life, is the reason I am standing here tonight. He is the reason I passed the bar exam, the reason I have served this state for 18 years, the reason I wake up every morning with something still left to do. He turned back to my son. I just watched this man be asked to leave his own son's event, and before he takes another step toward that door, I need you to understand something. My son had gone the particular pale that doesn't come from embarrassment. It comes from premonition. When your development group applied for the coastal zoning variance on this property, the senator said the commission was prepared to deny it. The environmental impact review had been flagged. Your tax increment financing application was 3 votes short on city council. He let that land. I made 4 phone calls over 2 days. My son said nothing. I made those calls because someone on my staff pulled your company's registered agent documents and saw the last name Hargrove. And I thought, just maybe, that the man who carried me out of a fire on Avenue L had a son who wanted to build something here. So I made the calls. His voice was still controlled, but something underneath it had been building for a long time. I want to be precise, I didn't do it for you. I've never met you before tonight. I did it for the man you just had escorted toward your exit. He looked at my son with something that wasn't anger anymore, something quieter and harder than anger. And I did it because that is what you do when someone gives you back your life. He walked toward me with his hand extended. I shook it. I couldn't find anything worth saying, so I didn't say anything. His grip was firm and his other hand closed over mine for a moment, the way people do when a handshake isn't sufficient, but words haven't arrived yet. I owe you a debt I'm never going to finish paying, he said, quiet enough that it was mostly between us. You already paid it, I said. You turned out fine. He laughed, a surprised, unguarded sound that broke through before he could stop it, and I think in that moment, the room remembered how to breathe. I'm not going to call what happened next justice. Justice is a cleaner word than what actually occurred in that lobby over the following hour. What occurred was more like watching someone realize, very slowly and very publicly, that the foundation under their feet wasn't exactly what they'd believed it to be. My son stood in the center of his marble lobby, and the senator's words hung in the air, the way smoke hangs inside structure after the fire is out. You can't unbreathe it, it gets into the walls. I watched him put it together. The Coastal Commission variance, the TIF votes that had cleared by 1, the permits that came through 30 days faster than anyone had projected. He'd built a story around all of it. A story about his own relationships, his own understanding of pressure points, his own relentless capability. There was truth in that story. He was capable. He did work hard. He had genuinely built something here. But the ground it stood on wasn't entirely his. My daughter-in-law stood with her hand over her mouth. Around the room, 200 people were processing the same information in real time, that the young developer they'd come to celebrate had built his empire partly on a debt he hadn't known existed, owed to a man he'd just tried to have removed from the premises. Senator Dawson stayed another 40 minutes. He spoke briefly with the press, something diplomatic about community investment and the quiet heroism of first responders, and on his way out he stopped beside me. Dinner Thursday, he said. I want to introduce you to people. Veterans Advocacy Board, you'd be good on it. I'll think about it, I said. You'll say yes, he said, and smiled and left. My son found me near the windows as the event wound down. The guests had thinned, the press had gone. The servers were moving quietly between tables collecting glasses. He looked like he'd aged in a single evening. Dad, there was nothing left of the hardness from earlier. I didn't know. I know you didn't. The variance, the permits, the council votes, I genuinely believed I had done that work. I thought those relationships were mine. You did earn a good portion of it, I said. I wanted to be fair, because being fair has always mattered more to me than being right. But not all of it. No, I said, not all of it. He looked down at his hands. He has my hands, wide across the palm, short fingers, hands that look like they were built for something physical. His never did what mine did, but the shape is the same. I've noticed that since he was a baby, and I still notice it now. The things I said tonight, he started. You said what you said, I agreed. I was not going to smooth the edges of it for him. Dad, I'm sorry. I mean that as plainly as I know how to say it. He looked up, and for a moment I saw 9 years old in the dugout looking up into the stands. I am genuinely sorry. I looked at my son for a long time. I thought about 34 years of loving him through all the versions of himself he'd cycled through. The curious kid, the restless teenager, the ambitious young man who couldn't get out of Galveston fast enough, the successful developer who sometimes seemed to have forgotten that Galveston was where he came from. I know you are, I said. I need some time. He nodded. He didn't argue or negotiate or try to move me toward a resolution that would be more comfortable for him. He just accepted it, and I think that was the first time in a long while that he'd heard me say something and simply let it be true. 5 months later, I'm writing this from the back porch of a rental house in Kemah, 30 minutes north of Galveston on the bay. It is not a large house. It has a dock that needs 2 planks replaced and a view that needs nothing at all. I drink my coffee out here in the mornings and watch the pelicans work the shallows, and on clear days I can see clean across to the far shore, and I have nowhere I need to be. Senator Dawson and I have had dinner 4 times since the Meridian opening. He put me on the Veterans Advocacy Board, and I accepted. It is the kind of work I hadn't known I wanted until I was already doing it. Sitting across from men and women who came home carrying things they don't have language for, and knowing enough of the dialect to be useful. There is a retired Army staff sergeant on the board who lost both his brothers to the same deployment. We talk on the phone sometimes after meetings, late enough that the bay outside my window has gone dark. I did not expect to make a friend at 62. It is a good thing to be wrong about. My son texts me twice a week. Short messages, a project update, a question about something he half remembered from when he was young. Once a photograph of the Meridian at sunset with the words, "You should come see it in daylight sometime." I haven't responded to that one yet. I'm still thinking about it, which means I'm still in the process of figuring out what I actually want, which is something I should have done a long time ago. The development work has slowed for him. He told me in a message last month that he'd hired someone to audit everything the Hargrove Group had built and trace the origins of each approval more accurately. I don't know what that looked like in practice. I trust that he's doing it, not because I trust him blindly, but because the man who accepted a simple, "I need some time" without pushing back is a different man than the one who had security move me toward a door. My daughter-in-law calls on Sundays. She always did. That hasn't changed. The battalion chief's ring is on my right hand where it has always been. The centennial pin is in a small dish on my kitchen counter. I took it off eventually, not because my son asked me to, but because I realized it was never about the pin. What the pin represented doesn't require a lapel. It's in the wrist that aches when the weather changes. It's in the way I still automatically count heads when I walk into a room. It's in everything I am, and that doesn't go anywhere regardless of what I'm wearing. One morning last week I was standing on the dock watching the bay come alive in the early light, and I thought about something the senator said at our last dinner. He'd been talking about the night of the fire. Those 4 minutes in the dark on the second floor when he hadn't known if he was getting out. He told me he'd made a decision in that darkness. If he survived, he was going to build a life that justified the survival. He looked across the table at me and said, "You gave me the chance to keep that promise." I've thought about that almost every single day. I've thought about it too. Not because it made me feel like something I'm not. I never did the job for recognition, but because it reminded me of something I'd let get buried under years of quiet disappointment. The things that actually last are not the buildings or the titles or the rooms full of important people. They are the moments when someone needed you, and you were there. I was there. I am still here. On Saturday, a text came from my son. I filed for permits on a mixed-use project in Dickinson. Smaller than the Meridian, local investors only, no state connections. Just the work. Then a minute later, "I wanted you to know." I read it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the dock railing and looked out at the water for a while, at the light coming up across the bay, and the pelicans beginning their morning runs, and the sound of a boat engine starting somewhere out of sight. Then I picked up the phone and typed, "That's good, son, do the work." He wrote back one word, "I will." I put the phone in my shirt pocket and picked up my coffee and stood there on that dock, until the bay had settled into its full morning quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't empty but full, the way silence gets when there's nothing left unresolved inside it. This is what earned peace feels like. Not the absence of everything hard. Not a story with a clean and tidy ending. Just standing on ground you know is solid, knowing exactly what it cost to get there, and being at home in that knowledge in a way you never quite managed before. The ring catches the light sometimes when I'm out here in the mornings. I notice it, and I let myself notice it, and I don't apologize for that to anyone.